Welcome to Empowered Christian. I'm Pastor Brian Holmes. Today's question, should Christians celebrate Halloween? Now, I certainly cannot speak for all of Christianity, but I can give you an overview of the discussion about Halloween, the pros and the cons, and provide you with some ideas to give consideration and wrestle with. So it really begins with the origins of Halloween. Now, there's two schools or camps of thought in this. One is that it has pagan roots, and the other is that it has Christian roots. So let's dive into the pagan roots first. This pagan and occultic origin, and I really think that the historic evidence for Halloween here is pretty solid. And it begins over 3,000 years ago. The majority of historians agree on this, that the ancient northern Celts, particularly in Ireland and Scotland, had a nighttime festival called Samhain, and now it's spelled Samhain, like Samhain, but it's actually pronounced Samhain or Samhain. And this occurred on October 31st. The Celts and their spiritist priests and mediums, these were called Druids, they believed that on this night of the year, the veil between the natural realm and the realm of the dead was the thinnest, and the dead spirits had access to and roamed the earth. They would tell stories about loved ones who died in the past year and talk to them and pray to them. They did believe that they could communicate back. So this would be necromancy. But in order to repel those dead spirits that were vengeful, they would dress up and adorn grotesque facial masks, and to repel them from their homes, they would put on their doorsteps hollowed out turnips with a grotesque face or scary things carved into it and a candle inside of it to light it up. People would gather around bonfires, tell scary or mythical stories about fairies, elves, spirits, monsters, ghosts. Many at this time would do divination rituals about the following year, perform witchcraft or occult ceremonies, and celebrate other forms of pagan or Mother Earth or nature worship type spiritism. So very similar practices are actually continued to this day. In his Satanic Bible, the founder of the Church of Satan, Anton LaVey, said in the 20th century that Halloween was their most important holiday of the year. This belief is held by a vast amount of pagan religions as well, who consider the day their high holy day, including Wicca, Santeria, and many others. Many modern-day satanic cults with occult roots seek to do evil and mayhem on this day, including murder, vandalism, and even human and animal sacrifice. Of course, any celebration of evil is absolutely prohibited by the God of the Bible, but even the relatively innocent forms of divination, such as predicting future love interests, necromancy, i.e. talking to the dead, or witchcraft, are strictly prohibited by the God of the Bible. And I'll cite some sources here. Okay, so now let's take a look at the second camp. This would be Christian origins. Now, I personally haven't found this argument very convincing, but for the sake of honesty and transparency, I will let you know that it does exist, and some scholars do hold to it. Either way, there are definitely Christian elements that have blended in with today's Halloween tradition. So in this view, it is accepted that there were pagan folk religious celebrations at this time of the year, including those going back some 1,500 years by the Northern Celts. But since there were no written records among those people until their Christianization in the 5th century, we cannot know about the holiday with any certainty. Now, there's always been a time when people celebrated. It was going from warm weather to cold weather, so it was common amongst various cultures outside of the northern Celts, pretty much worldwide, one would presume. But either way, there was definitely a tradition that reflected itself within Greek and Roman culture that presumably came before that time. These scholars that don't accept that the tradition came from the Northern Celts specifically assert that most of what we know about Samhain comes from Northern Celtic folklore in the 10th century onwards. So this would have been after the Christianization of Europe. So the second argument goes like this, that Halloween is a blending of the words All Hallows Eve, or evening, referring to the evening before the Roman Catholic Church's All Saints' Day on November 1st, Hallow, meaning holy, such as in the Our Father says, speaking to God, hallowed be thy name. So this day was set aside to commemorate all Christian saints and martyrs who had lost their lives for the faith. This is why people think about the dead on this day of the year. Originally on May 13th, 1610, it was moved to November 1st by AD 741 and formally added to the church calendar in AD 835. Some scholars assert that this Catholic holiday already existed, and then pagans added Spiritism and paganism beliefs to it. Other scholars say that the pagan holiday existed much longer, and then the Catholic Church attempted to Christianize the holiday of their pagan citizens, as they did with basically every other pagan thing in society. But those people never fully gave up their pagan beliefs. In looking for a non-pagan reason for costumes on this day, the best I've found is pre-Reformation British Isles, where poor people would go door to door souling, which was just praying for the souls of loved ones in purgatory in exchange for food or gifts. In some regions, they would dress up in costumes, such as saints, angels, or demons, and perform a mini play for homeowners. Of course, I can see the word Halloween is a blending of both of these origin stories. Hallow comes from the Catholic All Saints' Day tradition, where Ween comes from the latter half of Samhain. I think it is apparent that both of these ancient traditions have had an influence on modern-day Halloween. So now let's take a look at modern-day Halloween and dressing up. Now, when it comes to determining whether or not participating in Halloween and or dressing up is bad, it really depends upon which of these two origins you believe is true. It also depends on what you think modern-day Halloween is celebrating in the context of the larger culture, and also what you personally intend to celebrate with it. I think a strong argument can be made that Halloween does nothing more than glorify and celebrate evil. Think about the symbolism. Haunted houses, witches, black cats, Satan, demons, ghosts, goblins, zombies, vampires, axe murderers, serial killers, mummies, blood, guts. This is really a celebration of and a joking around about death and things that cause death in order to mock death. Many are dying now, and many have died apart from the Lord. So this isn't a laughing matter. Ghosts aren't real. There's actually one death and then the judgment. And hell is a real destination people will go to. People fear death, so they mock it just as we have made a habit out of cartoonizing Satan with the red outfit, the horns, and the pitchfork. We make fun of it in order to take seriousness and anxiety and fear out of it. But in the end, if we don't take it serious enough to protect ourselves from it, it will ultimately destroy us. Additionally, many young people are confused about the reality of death. There is a rise in today's culture of atheism, agnosticism, and pagan humanism. Our liberal culture literally celebrates any and every idea, even ones that we as Christians know to be lies, such as ghosts, zombies, vampires, false gods, etc. And these things only give more doubts to young minds as they are developing. Not to mention the other worldly things that are celebrated on Halloween. Things like blatant sexuality, partial or near full nudity, promiscuity, fornication, hedonism, drunkenness, carousing, drug use, vandalism, mischief, wild parties, and orgies. Many of our youth began with innocent costumes as children, and then remembering how fun Halloween was as a child, continued this fun as a teenager or young adult later in not so innocent ways. So that which doesn't explicitly glorify death and evil still glorifies sinfulness and ungodliness. Even cute Casper the Friendly Ghost costumes celebrate a demonic lie that has and does send people to hell. Even people who call themselves Christians fall prey to this cultural seduction. The fact that our 70+% Christian nation spends over $8 billion every year on Halloween, which is the second highest amount in spending after only Christmas, speaks volumes about the impact the holiday has on us. We should not underestimate the influence that cultural seduction and fun has on the beliefs that we end up forming. So what about the Halloween costume and trick-or-treating for children? Well, I can certainly see how it can be very innocent and fun. I can see how it can give homeowners an opportunity to serve and to bless others with treats. However, I can also see problems coming out of a society that brings forth children thinking, all I have to do is show up and you'll give me something. Our society does show symptoms that children who are becoming entitled adults who think that the world owes them something. I wonder if some of the entitlement mentality comes from adults who were former children who, on every one of our materialistic holidays, expected people to give them something that they didn't have to work for. And often those houses whose lights weren't on, those were the jerk houses. In conclusion, I think it is safe to conclude that any form of dressing up and celebrating in and participation of evil, death, haunted houses, magic, or demonic costumes should be avoided. These things do not honor or glorify God, and in fact, they have contributed to the decay of our society and increased godlessness. In today's culture, we celebrate sinful ideas without even thinking about it. Many children loved shows like Bewitched or Harry Potter. Do we think these kids will grow up and know that real witchcraft is actually real and demonic and taps into something demonic? Christians are to walk in the light, not revel in the darkness. Yes, we are to be the light of the world and to go into the darkness. We are first and foremost to be holy, i.e., set apart from the world. But what if we know that we are conquerors of death and have no reason to fear it and do not believe in the lies of Satan, such as ghosts, that hell doesn't really exist, etc. What if we know that humans die once and Christian souls will go to be with the Lord upon death until Christ returns to make all things new and clothe us with glorious eternal bodies? What if we trust our Bible and we know that witches are real and magic is real and demons are real and evil spirits are real, and these things really do give worship and access to demons? Should we pretend that they aren't real? What if we know that all these things are in the world and glorified by the world, but that he who is in us is greater than he who is in the world? Does that mean we can use our liberty to do whatever we want? No. We have to realize that our witness to the world reflects Jesus to the world and God's truth to the world. If we participate in the same activities that spread lies and celebrate and glorify evil and sin, then we communicate to the world that there is nothing wrong with thinking and doing these things. And just because we know the truth ourselves doesn't mean that everyone else does. In fact, our bad witness may lead others astray. And God plainly tells us that if we do this, we are committing a sin. We need to learn from Paul's lesson about eating meat sacrificed to idols in 1 Corinthians 8. So does this mean that you cannot celebrate Halloween in a godly way? Well, perhaps not. Many Christians have used this holiday as an opportunity to talk about spiritual things with people who are already thinking about it and open to it at this time of year. Many carve crosses into their pumpkins, hand out gospel tracts in baggies along with the best candy, dress up like saints or other godly figures, play worship music so that their visitors can hear it, or ask to pray over people who visit them. They see this as an opportunity to bring some Jesus to those who come to their homes, who may not have any experiences with godly Christians before. We don't usually get the opportunity to have them come to us. Some take advantage of that opportunity. Other Christians will have godly parties and celebrate All Saints' Day and or All Hallows' Eve, the night before, and invite their neighbors, giving them a fun night out with music and dancing and candy and conversation, but without all the demonic symbolism. Some Christians will decide instead to celebrate Reformation Day on Halloween because on October 31st in 1517 was the day that Martin Luther nailed his 95 Theses to the Roman cathedral door, which ultimately led to the Protestant Reformation. Some other devout spiritual warfare type Christians will silently pray over individuals who pass them in the streets or who come to their door, or drive around and pray over neighborhoods to offset and fend off any occultic or satanic prayers and sacrifices that may be offered on Halloween night in those neighborhoods. And other Christians will simply avoid the holiday altogether and have nothing to do with any of it, wanting to be fully sanctified and completely set apart from everything that it stands for. Ultimately, it's up to you. Learn about the holiday and give serious thought to all of these things. Don't just pass over it. Pray about them. Listen to the conviction of your own conscience. Listen to the prompting and the conviction of the Holy Spirit. And in all things, seek first the kingdom of God and His righteousness.